Greetings, programmers. This is part 2 of our series on making the web-based store. In the last episode, we talked about what a cookie is and the basics of how you store and load cookies. And in between sessions, I did some research, and one thing I discovered is that Microsoft Edge actually will be useful for our second part of this example. So if you have Microsoft Edge, you'll be able to use that instead of Firefox. So whatever that's worth. And then also you'll notice that I've put some commented code in here. And what this code is for is if you wanted to do the expiration date on your cookie to have it expire at a later time, here I have a variable called days, and you can load a variable days with the number of days that you'd like to delay. And then we're multiplying it by 24 because there's 24 hours in a day, times 60, there's 60 minutes in an hour, times 60, there's 60 seconds in a minute, and then times 1,000, there's 1,000 milliseconds in a second. And basically time is stored as the number of milliseconds since January 1st, 1970. So that's why that calculation works out the way it does. And what you would do on the third line there, you see expires equals, and then you're going to give the expiration date given in milliseconds. And we convert it into a GMT string. So you could add that to have your cookies last a little bit longer. Okay, so now that's out of the way, what I'd like to look at is if we look at our string here, our cookie, I want to pull one of those pieces out because what we want to do is we're gonna have a shopping cart where we're gonna put things into our shopping cart, and then we want to pull them out to show them in an invoice to say, hey, here are the things that you said you wanted to buy, and we need to be able to pull those out one piece at a time. So here I'm going to just do a very basic example for pulling one of those variables out. So let's say I want to pull this dex out. Okay, so what we're going to do, I want to create a function that will take our cookie and pull it apart and give us if I give it a variable name, it'll collect that variable and give us the value of that variable back. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to call the function getValue. And we're going to pass it the name of our variable. Okay, so once we pass the name of that variable, what we want to do is, well, first of all, let's look at this. So we're going to put the general case, which is to say, I did not find your variable, so I'm going to return nothing. So we're going to have that. And then the next step is to actually check to see if the variable is in the cookie. Well, in order to do a little simplification, the first thing I want to do is check to see, does the cookie even exist? Okay, and the way that we check to see if the cookie exists is we're going to take this document cookie, and we're going to get the length of it, and if that length is greater than 0, then we know that a cookie exists. And technically, I guess it would be a minimum length of 3 because you would have a single variable, an equal sign, and whatever its value is if it was a 1-character value. But just for simple, we're going to say, hey, are you bigger than 0? And that should be adequate. All right, once we've determined that we do have something in the cookie, we need to figure out where in that cookie the variable sits. And we're going to do that by looking for that variable name in the cookie. And what I want to do is I want to put that into an index variable that I'm going to call start. So that's going to be the start of our variable. And that start will be, we're going to look inside the cookie. And I want to get the index of our variable name. And then I want to go ahead and make sure that we also include that equal sign. Okay, so that's going to look to say, hey, where in the cookie is that? All right, now, next thing we should do is, getting a little ahead of myself here, I want to check to make sure that we found it. So we're going to ask the question, we're just going to say, if that index of the start is not equal to -1, what that means is that it actually found it. When you do a search for something in a list, and a string is a list of characters, and it's not found in that list, the index will return as -1. Otherwise, it'll tell you what the location is within that list. So here we're saying it was found. The index is not -1. So if we know where the start is, the next step is to figure out where does it end? And if we remember from our string up here, so here, it ends with a semicolon at the end of each of our things. So we're looking where is that semicolon, and specifically we need that semicolon based on the variable that we looked at. So what we're going to do, again, we're going to do the index of, okay, and I want to know the index of the semicolon, but we need to give it a starting point. So index of supports an overloaded method that can take either a single string value or a string value and a starting location. So the starting location we want is where we found that initial piece, and we want to know where the semicolon is, the first semicolon is from that point. And so this will search for it at that point. Now, if our end is equal to -1, that means it didn't find a semicolon. What we want to do is we actually want to set the end to be the end of our cookie. Okay, so here I'm going to say my end is equal to the cookie, and then I want to go to the end, so we're going to go to the length. Okay, so if we didn't find a semicolon, as would be the case at the end of our cookie, then I just want to go all the way to the end, and that'll be our end. Okay, so once we have that, the next step is to actually return that value. Okay, and what we're going to do is, first of all, we need to unescape that value, because as HTML stores these things, it's possible that things like slashes or quotes or spaces get escaped. They get their, well, for example, %20 is the space in a escape string. So we need to unescape that string. Now, just at the time of this recording, the function unescape is actually deprecated, and there's another function, but I'm not too familiar with it. So this is what I'm comfortable and familiar with, so I'm going to go ahead and use unescape. If you want to make sure that your code is more up to date, you might want to do some research on that. Look up unescape and look at what it was replaced by. I'm just going to say I've not used that other function, so I don't know what kind of behavior it would have. So, and I know that this works, so I'm just going to go and go with this. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to grab a substring from the cookie, and we're going to go from our start location to the end location that we created. Okay, and so that will return our value. Okay, so this should get me the value. So let's say, for example, I want to find out what the dexterity is that's stored in this cookie. So I'm going to go to our display function, and I'm going to grab that dexterity. I'm going to store it in a variable called d. And what I want to do is I want to say get the value, and I'm going to ask for the dex. Okay, and then I'm going to throw that into an alert box. So I want to know, hey, what was our dex? Okay. All right, so I'm going to save that cookie. I'm going to come back over here, and I'm going to reload my page. And because I reloaded it, if I click display now, okay, it did. Actually, this is a good point to bring up. First of all, let's address what happened. So it displayed that my dexterity was 8. So we see, if we compare it to the value that's shown on the screen, it's there. Okay, and I knew this, and I forgot to mention this in the last video, but you'll notice that I reloaded the page, but it still had these values in here. Okay, so just for a moment, I'm going to copy this. I want to try something. So if I copy that and I close my cookie test, okay, and I reload it, let's see, will it still display? Okay, so as long as the session is still open, so that last session was from the previous video, it's going to keep the values. But as soon as you close that window, it's going to throw away the values unless you set that expiration date. So just be aware of that if you're as you're testing your stuff, to be aware of that. All right, so that's how you pull out individual elements from a cookie, variable by variable. And so this gets us one step closer to being able to build our web store. I hope you enjoyed this. Please like the video if you thought this was useful. And if you like more videos like this, please consider subscribing. Thank you very much.